thinking about the tragic incidents that continue to happen in the U.S. And when that happens, let's say like on Saturday, Sunday, sometimes on Monday, you don't want to be bothered, right? And but the remote work allows you to do that. It allows you to be on camera. It allows you to still have your personal space. It allows you to handle tasks, projects independently in your bubble until you're ready to engage with something else, right?
And now that COVID has become more of an endemic, companies are asking employees to return to the office, and there are many implications for the Black community in terms of safety and representation at work. And so I want to ask you about what are some of the pros and cons of remote work for Black employees?
Pros. I think when you are not of the majority, you spend so much of your energy having to prepare yourself mentally to have to code switch, to have to hop. You're a fish out of water. So you're not, because you're not centered and you're not given the space to actually be comfortable in that skin or in your own space, you're constantly having to morph and actually make other people feel comfortable by your existence or presence. The beauty of it, you look at these rooms that we're in, everything from who shows up on the back of our walls to the space and the things that are around us can be uniquely our own, right? And there's a certain amazing, I think, quality of just life that increases in your mental health just by knowing you don't have to perform in all these most random spaces. Performances can happen in how you walk to the bathroom, who you interact with in between your assignments. It's far greater than actual work. And that I think is, working remote has given great shelter to certainly people of color or those who have been marginalized in organizations. Now, however, once again, going back to a broader culture note, if your existence is not celebrated, then a lot of times your presence is something that is constantly under review. And so if you then are not there, someone is already kind of taking a lens that they're scrutinizing whether or not you're showing up the way you need to show up because you might or might not be a cultural fit by your absence.
Sometimes you're dealing with microaggressions, right? You're dealing with the small things that people say that oftentimes when they're saying it or doing it are virtually harmless, but they impact you because you're being judged because of something specifically. And I think for Black women, one of the things that's really important and sensitive to us is our hair care, right? And having people judge you because of the various styles of your hair, the textures of your hair, the length and the color is something that you deal with. It's a real thing when you come into the workplace. If you are more on the virtual experience, it's not really a thought. I think everyone is just so caught up in just like getting through whatever that meeting is in that session. The light conversation that you have, what you call banter, it doesn't really exist.
So how can remote and hybrid options be used as a vehicle for inclusion and anti-racism?
The beauty of, I think, remote work is that people could possibly feel the ability to speak in a way in which they weren't able to speak because they haven't had to kind of like work through all of those voices or the energy in an office space that felt like they couldn't be seen or heard. Now, I think the issue though is it's not on the people. Like, I don't know if remote work can really tip the scale if you've got a system that fails to still recognize, celebrate, and decide that someone else should be elevated who isn't in the majority. Sometimes remote work can really help people hide in a great, or organizations hide what it is that they're not doing in a greater way, because that energy is not felt on a daily basis.
What are the biggest misconceptions about best practices, air quotes, around best practices for inclusion and equity in the workplace?
Ooh, this is a good question, because guess what? I hate the word best practices. Because I believe sometimes when we use those type of terminologies, it narrows us into a specific thinking and it shows that we all think the same, right? But there's so many variables. If you're having any type of D&I program, minimally, you want to have these things, employee resource groups, right? Because that helps drive culture. It helps drive belonging. When we're thinking about that inclusion piece, that's what it does. And then when you have that inclusion piece, the diversity piece comes in because then it increases representation. Because if I like it here and identify as a marginalized person and in a marginalized group and a diverse person, I'm going to recommend that to someone that looks like me. every single department within your organization has a budget. Your D&I function should have a budget as well too. So again, foundational type of things, identifying what your actual commitments are, having data to back up those commitments, and communicating where you are in the progress.
The issue I have is that a best practice, I don't find these best practices lasting longer than a season. I don't know if I don't know if we're really subscribing to best practices or we're really just chasing moments. I wonder if too many times the best practices regarding diversity and inclusion are too far away from what are good things to drive the business, right?